representative for the Czech Republic in the European Network of Positive Psychology, and a member of the board of the Czech Moravian Psychological Society. She has been a member of several international research projects and a member of the editorial boards of 5 prestigious academic journals. Dr. Alena is also the author of the first comprehensive monograph on positive psychology in the Czech language and a number of scientific and popular publications in the fields of positive psychology and health psychology. With your rich experience and expertise in the field, Dr. Alena, it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you for our NPPA webinar. And without further ado, I'll just take another moment to introduce to the topic that Dr. Alena would be speaking on later today. So her lecture for the day is titled Living with Hope, the Role of Hope in Health and Well-Being. While this process is for all of us across the globe as we are living in, together with this pandemic and the COVID situation. So I think hope is something that we could all truly get another good dose of. So Dr. Alena's talk today summarizes and comments upon her own research findings related to the area of psychology of hope. It looks at the content and role of hope among various populations, including children, elderly, homeless, the patient population as well. And there is evidence that not only does hope have an important effect on health and subjective well-being in everyday life, but that it also acts as a significant protective factor during life crisis. Due to the significant practical implications of the phenomena of hope, the final part of her lecture would briefly address some hope-enhancing interventions. So just to also set the note for the next about 60 to 90 minutes together, there is an ample time that we have allocated for discussions towards the end of Dr. Alena's lecture today. So as we go along over the next questions on the chat window, and we'll be happy to take them up to facilitate the interaction after she's done with her lecture. So over to you, Dr. Alena. Am I audible to you, Dr. Alena? Would you like to unmute yourself, please?
Absolutely. Okay. Let me share my screen now.
We can see your screen.
Can you see it now? Absolutely. And can you hear me well?
Perfect.
Good. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a real pleasure and honor to be part of the webinar of National Association of Positive Psychology in India. So thank you very much. And yeah, it's going to be an honor for me to present you some of the results of research studies on hope. And as you said, I also believe that hope predominantly at these times is a key factor which has a healing and curing effect on our mental health. And our research shows that it has also significant effect on physical health. So I've been researching hope since 2012, so it's going to be 8 years. And I'd like to briefly present you results of studies when we were exploring hope among different samples, such as children and students, and also adults, and also elder people, and homeless people. Homeless, someone would say hopeless. And actually the results shows that hope also plays a significant role of their well-being. And we also explored the role of hope among homeless people caregivers, and in large samples of general population, not only Czech population, but also populations of other countries, including India. So it's a privilege for me to have this opportunity to talk about our research on hope. Well, at the beginning, let me just briefly comment on several perspectives on hope, because within positive psychology, hope can be understood as a kind of thinking style. It's a theory developed by Snyder, who is the author of the book Handbook of Hope that was published in 2000. And he's the author of so-called cognitive theory of hope, and we are going to talk about it a little later. Hope for many of us is a kind of positive emotion, which has also a significant effect on our well-being, and it's one of the positive emotion that has been researching by American psychologist Barbara Fredrickson, who is the expert in the field of research of positive emotions. Well, hope can be also classified as one of character strengths. And if you look at the VIA values in action classification of character strengths and virtues, so you will find hope and optimism as well in this classification. And for some people who are really hopeful and optimistic, their predominant trait, or let's say signature trait, signature strengths. Last but not least, for many of us, hope has its own, let's say, added value in terms of transcendence, spirituality. And actually, this is quite a newly developed concept of hope, which focuses more on this transcendental aspect of hope that is closely related to spirituality, meaningfulness, and you know, the most significant life values. Well, in our research, we've been focusing predominantly on two perspectives on hope. One of them is the previously mentioned dispositional hope in terms of thinking style that was developed by Snyder. And just to briefly remind you or introduce you this concept, it comprises of three elements, and it shows, the research shows, and Snyder presented this way, that one of the most important components of hope thinking is, of course, related to the goal. And those people who attain specific, attainable goals, so they also show higher hope. The other very important element of cognitive approach to hope is the pathways. This is the component which is related to our ability to plan, to take different routes and pathways to achieve our goals. And the third is agency, a kind of willpower and motivation, a goal-directed energy that keeps our motor running and helps us to attain our goals. So you see the American Snyder's approach to hope is kind of similar to the concept of self-efficacy, you know, believing that we are able to attain our goals, finding the pathways, keeping motivated. And the other perspective, which is not directly opposite, but definitely it's different, is the concept of Andreas Kraft, which is the psychologist from Switzerland, University of St. Gallen, and he developed the concept of so-called perceived hope, which comprises more transcendental and spiritual aspects of hope. And in this concept, hope is not about, you know, briefly said, it's not about thinking, it's more about feeling hopeful in a deeper sense. And particularly, it's related to fundamental trust in positive outcomes of our efforts or activities, but particularly also the positive belief that also the situations that we cannot directly control can turn out well. Well, so just to be clear about that, in the dispositional hope concept, hopeful thinking, there is the important role of goal, specific, attainable, valuable. There is the important component of pathways, the routes people take to achieve desired goals, and last but not least, the motivation, willpower, energy. And Snyder's vast research, which has been also summarized in his book, Psychology of Hope, and many other research studies, shows that people who are high in these components, they tend to be more hopeful in general. As concerns the perceived hope, as I already mentioned, this is a different approach and it's closely related to experiencing meaning in life, helping other people, enjoying close and trusted relationships, and also it's more related to spiritual and religious experiences. Well, and based on these two concepts, there have been developed measures, scales. So maybe some of you are familiar with the dispositional hope scale, which comprises 12 items, and 4 are for, some of them are for the component of agency, and the others are for pathways. And the examples of the items you can see on the screen. As when we look at the perceived hope scale developed by Kraft and published in 2017, so you can notice that the items of this scale are really related to hope itself. So the examples of the items are such as hope improves the quality of my life, or in my life hope outweighs anxiety, or even in difficult times I'm able to remain hopeful. So the items are directly focused on the experience of hope. So let me briefly present you the results of studies when we were using both dispositional and perceived hope scale. And at the beginning of my research of hope, I've been using dispositional hope scale, and we were exploring the role of hopeful thinking in a sample of Czech children. We had 350 of them of mean age about 10 years. And we found out that those children who scored higher in dispositional hope, so it means that they were able to set their goals, they were able to find the right ways and pathways to achieve their goals, and also they were able to keep motivated and use their willpower for achievement of their goals. So those children not only showed to be significantly happier than low hopers, let's say, but they also had a better quality of relationships. They had more friends. Children with higher dispositional hope in terms of cognitive style, they were also more engaged in physical activities, so they exercised more. And they spent more quality time with their parents. And last but not least, they had better academic achievement. So it's interesting to see how hope is reflected in very diverse and various life dimensions, from physical fitness to psychological well-being and social quality of social relationship with friends and parents, and also it's reflected in academic achievement. We also focused on research of hope in university students. We had a sample of 317 of students of mean age about 2 to 22 years, and we found out there was an echo. Can you hear me well? I hope so.
Yes, we can hear you well, Dr. Alena. Just a reminder and request to all our participants to keep their microphones on mute, please. Thank you. Please carry on, Dr. Alena. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, so our research shows that not only those students who were higher in dispositional hope, hopeful thinking, they were more happy, they showed higher subjective well-being, but also when we measured the level of forgiveness and gratitude, so together with hope, they showed to be an important resources, individual, predictors of subjective well-being. Interestingly, also those students who were more grateful, good things they have or had in their lives, they also showed higher hope for future. Well, we also explored hope among elderly, and that was not very large sample. It was not easy to get respondents from the age of 62 to 89, but we succeeded to get some data from them. We had a sample of elder people of mean age 78.2, and we explored hope in relation to the concept of healthy or successful aging. And the results show that those old people who were higher in dispositional hope, so who were able to set attainable goals, so we can understand well that if you are 89, so you probably do not plan for next decade, for next 10 years, but you can definitely plan something for this evening or next day or weekend. So those people who were able to have plans and goals in their life, and they were active in pursuing these goals, so not only they showed better physical health, but also they reported higher meaningfulness in life. And actually, this is one of the key factors of life satisfaction and overall well-being in elder people. And last but not least, there was quite a high correlation with dispositional hope and life satisfaction. So never give up hope. It obviously plays an important role across the life course. Well, and one would say that homeless people are supposed to be helpless or hopeless people. And we had an opportunity to work also with a group of homeless people who were using the facilities of Salvation Army home. And we had interviews with them, and we also asked them to fill in the questionnaires. So there was a sample of 65 homeless people of mean age 51 years. And again, the results showed that the dispositional hope, the ability to think about goals, the ability to attain the goals, so together with ability to be grateful for even the small things that they have in their life that are healthy or functioning. So those people who were higher in hope and gratitude showed significantly higher positive mental health in terms of flourishing. And the other question was, how is hope of homeless people related to hope of homeless people caregivers? Because when you work with homeless people, so it seems that hope should play an important role in this process. And results show that it's quite important. So we had a sample of 54 employees of Salvation Army who were taking care of homeless people. Their mean age was about 43 years. And that was quite surprising outcome, showing that homeless shelter employees, they did not significantly differ from homeless people in levels of hope and gratitude. So one would say that, people who are employees would score higher in hope. No, these both samples, they had average mean values of or scores of dispositional hope. However, of Salvation Army, they reported higher flourishing in terms of positive mental health. And again, similarly to the sample of homeless people, these caregivers where their flourishing or positive mental health was significantly predicted by dispositional hope and gratitude. And when we asked also about the content of hopes among or resources of hopes among both homeless and caregivers, so of course their resources were very different. And while caregivers, they increase their hope through maintaining good relationship with colleagues and also having trust in God. So homeless people, they draw their hope from their friends and also family members. So the resources were different. Well, so these findings that I just briefly commented, they really show that the content of personal hopes and wishes among specific sample reflects not only developmental stage and situational context, and also the level of hope, of course. And the other aim of our studies on hope was focus on hope across cultures. And thanks to collaboration with my friend and colleague, Dr. Rajnish Chubisa from Birla Institute of Technology, we have been collecting data from both Indian and Czech samples. And the questions were, what are the hopes and wishes in Czech and Indian young adults? And also whether there are any differences in predictors of resources of hope among Czech and Indian university students. So let's look briefly at this. That was possible through thanks to a broad international project, the HOPE BAROMETER Survey, that has been launched by Dr. Andreas Kraft, the author of the concept Perceived Hope, in Switzerland in 2009. And since that time, many other countries were invited to join this international survey, including Germany, France, Czech Republic, India, Poland, Spain, Israel, South Africa, and many others. And if you were interested in some results, so you can definitely find them in the book that was published 2 years ago. The title is Hope for a Good Life, and you will also find there a chapter on Indian results on hope. Well, so let's look at the results of our sub-study, looking at the content of hopes and personal wishes among two samples of young adults, Czech and Indian. And there are so many culture differences. Actually, I've been traveling to India a lot. I love the country, I love the culture, and I always see that there are many differences despite the many similarities that we share as a human beings. So that was quite kind of interesting question to look at the hope and personal wishes across these very different countries and cultures. So when we ask the question, what are your main hopes and wishes for the next year? So maybe you have your own answer. Okay, there is some. Okay, thank you. Well, so the results show that the most significant hope and personal wish for Czech sample was related to happy partnership and happy family. This is what people wished for more as a most important wish. The second most important wish was concerning good personal health. The third, harmony in life, balanced life, ability to balance work activities and leisure and being with other people and also enjoy the company of ourselves, the balanced attitude to life. And the fourth, most important hope and wish of our respondents were good and trustful relationship with other people, not the family members. And the fifth most important wish was related to a chance or opportunities to be involved in a meaningful and satisfying tasks and not doing something that we find meaningless or unuseful. When we look at the Indian sample, so as they were university students, so it seems that nowadays Indian university students, they are more achievement oriented. So actually that was also the most important hope and wish for them to attain success in school, at university, at workplace. Also, I can perceive the shift from, from maybe we can discuss it a little bit later, but as I can see it, so there's more need for personal independence, and this result also show that the results show that the personal independence and self-determination is among the most important wishes and hopes of young adults. Of course, third, the very important hope and wish for having a good and trustful relationship with others, also being involved in meaningful and satisfying tasks. And fifth was personal health. Of course, it's important for everyone, but that's quite common that young people, they tend to take their health for granted. So it's not always on the first three, let's say, positions. So for Indian sample, it was number 5. One question is, what do you hope for? But of course, hope is not just hoping and waiting until something happens and until our hopes and wishes will come true out of, automatically. It's about our activities, what we do to pursue our hopes and to fulfill our wishes. And that was our second research question. And it shows that when we ask people about hope, so they naturally tend to think about it from the cognitive point of view. So when we ask people what do they do for achieving their goals and pursuing their hopes, majority of them, they said, I think a lot, I analyze circumstances, I inform myself, gather information, and I do not wait until someone do it for me. I take responsibility and I commit myself and take action. And the fourth, the most frequent answer was I motivate my family, and the fifth, motivating, engaging friends when we need to attain something that we hope for. For Indian sample, surprisingly to me, it was very, very similar, almost same. There was one exception, which shows how for the spirituality and God is inevitable, let's say, part of their life. So the fourth most frequent activity was trusting or praying to God, and fifth, again, engaging friends and let's say asking for social support when they try to achieve their goals. Well, so now we learned what people in Czech Republic and India hope for, what they do for achieving their hopes. And the third, the very interesting and important question is related to the resources of hope, because we are not alone, and there are people or circumstances that we can use for boosting our hope. So what are the resources of hope? In Czech sample, partners, wife, husband, these are the most significant resources or elements that boost our hope. Second most frequent was the answer, I give hope myself. No one can do it for me. It's our responsibility to keep hopeful. And of course, friends and people who we can witness how other people who are coping with some life challenges, how they do it and how they succeed, and this is something that can also increase our hope. And of course, hope which is transmitted from parents and grandparents who are encouraging us and believing in us. And for India, kind of self it seems to me that they are kind of self-confident. So the most frequent answer was, I give hope myself, and also they appreciate the hope that is transmitted from parents, grandparents, friends, also teachers. That was quite nice to see that teachers, educators, gurus, they also serve as a significant resource of hope for young Indian people, and also if they were married or having a partner, so these significant others, they are also resources of hope. So the other question was, now we know something about contents and activities and resources of hope. So when we look at the perceived hope, the feeling of hope, what are the psychosocial predictors across cultures in Czech and Indian culture? So the other step in our research was to explore whether perceived hope, the feeling of hope, is related more to social factors, such as having good relationship with others or not being lonely, or whether it's more related to dispositional characteristics such as dispositional optimism, or whether there is an important role played by self-transcendence, and we measured spirituality and generativity, which is the term that is related to our ability and willingness to do something good for others. And also, we aim to reveal what is the role of demographic variables, and which of them are associated with higher levels of hope. So let's briefly look at these results. And it shows, the regression model shows that those people in Czech Republic who were showing higher perceived hope in terms of the feeling of hope, so these were those who were high in optimism. Of course, when you are pessimistic and developing catastrophic scenarios, so you can hardly feel hopeful. That makes absolutely sense. Then there is also an important role of generativity. And actually, this is a very significant result to me, because it shows that when we want to keep hopeful, it's not just about trying to fulfill our own needs and desires and wishes. It's also about ability and willingness to do something good for others, because those who did, they showed higher hope. And last but not least, not being lonely. Actually, this low loneliness that was related to higher perceived hope points at the importance of having some relationships, because when we measured the positive relationships, how we are able to maintain relationships, that didn't show a significant effect on hope. However, not to be lonely, have someone. And sometimes we have conflicts, sometimes we have misunderstandings. That's life. But when we have someone in our life, then it can increase our hope. And the important thing is not to be lonely. And when we look at the Indian results, so there are two predominant resources of perceived hope. Again, not to be, pessimistic, not to be developed in negative, catastrophic, pessimistic thinking and scenarios, being able to think optimistically about the world and ourselves and society and so on. And again, generativity, which seems to play more important role than in Czech sample. So again, not to be focused just on our needs, but be able and be willing to contribute to others, to welfare of society. Well, and when we looked at the demographic factors which play a role in the levels of perceived hope, the feeling of hope, and dispositional hope, which is more the cognitive aspect of hope, we found out that when we looked at these effects in perceived hope, so females in several researches that we've been doing scored higher than males. Also, again, this was repeatedly found that the lowest perceived hope was found in the young age group, 18 to 29, and the highest was found in age group 50 to 59. So it might be related also, as we said, to the sense of meaningfulness, and we already know that unfortunately across cultures there is a increase of levels of depression and meaninglessness among young generation, and all our research also show that hope tends to increase with age. It is also related to our family status, because the lowest perceived hope was found among singles, while the highest was in married couples or those who were living with their partners. And there are also relations to education, level of education. We found the higher perceived hope among those who attained higher education in comparison to those who had, basic or lower levels of education. And last but not least, this is something that reinforced previous findings showing how generativity, the ability and willingness to do something good for others, for society, how it is related to hope. Also, this study showing that that higher perceived hope was significantly the perceived hope was significantly higher in those people who were engaged in any kind of volunteering activities, acts of kindness, charity activities, and so on. And when we looked at the role of demographic factors in dispositional hope in terms of hope for thinking, so interestingly, there were gender differences. So in this case, males, they are scored higher than females. So, it kind of points at the differences between more emotional and more rational, females and males. Similarly, dispositional hope in terms of hope for thinking has a tendency to increase with age. And same effect as in the perceived hope. The lowest dispositional hope for thinking, was among singles, and it was higher in married couples or those who are living with partner. And the same effect was found for education, and the same effect was found for volunteering. So not to be self-centered, not to be self-absorbed, being able to do or transmit hope or do something good for others. This seems to be one of the key factors for maintaining and increasing our own hope. So coming slowly to the end, how hope can be increased, how hope can be boosted. And one of our new studies, which is now under preparation, the publication is under preparation, was actually focusing on the question whether hope can be transmitted within the family. We had a project on intergenerational transmission of positive characteristics, and we measured life satisfaction, dispositional hope, perceived hope, and gratitude among families. And we had 73 families complete trials, mother, father, and child. And mothers were in mean age of 51, fathers mean age was about 53, and children, they were young adults of mean age 24. So 73 sets of these family members, and we found out that actually mother, father, and child, they across in families, they did not differ in their level of life satisfaction or dispositional hope for thinking, but there were significant differences between the levels of perceived hope and gratitude in the sample of children. So the young adults, the younger generation, showed significantly higher levels of gratitude, and that was a nice surprise actually, but lower perceived hope compared to their mothers and fathers. So again, this is in alignment with previous studies that I mentioned, that perceived hope, the feeling of hope, tends to grow with age. So, and the question is, can hope be transmitted? Is the level of hope and other characteristics of parents somehow related to the level of these variables among children? And this research shows that there was a correlation, there was a positive relationship between life satisfaction of mothers and fathers. So higher life satisfaction in mother, higher life satisfaction in father. The same was found for dispositional hope. And when we look at the mother-child relationship, so mothers who were more grateful, children were more grateful. And fathers who showed higher hope for thinking, dispositional hope, so that was related to higher dispositional hope in children. So it seemed that dispositional hope, in terms of how you think about your goals and how you attain it, this is something that can be taught or can be learned, and there is also study showing or suggesting by Snyder showing that this can have roots in observational learning. But we did not find this effect for perceived hope. So last slide is presenting a new study again, which is under preparation. And this is trying to answer the question how we can increase perceived, because we can see that dispositional, hopeful thinking is something that can be transmitted from parents, specifically fathers, to younger generation. But what about perceived hope? And we had a study exploring the effects of mindfulness meditation. So we took the participants of 8 weeks mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And we had a sample of 69 respondents of mean age 39.5. There were people, from general population, not students, anyone who signed up for this course. And we found out that those people who, when we measured these variables before the 8-week course of mindfulness meditation and after that, so not only we found out a significant decrease in the levels of perceived stress, we also found out significant increase in perceived hope and significant increase in harmony in life and also in mindfulness. So mindfulness seems to be, as also vast international research shows, seems to be one of the effective tools how we can not only develop our spiritual qualities and attain better harmony in life and build our ability for mindfulness and awareness in life, but also this is something that has effect on the feeling of hope. And I think specifically at these times, it's quite important. So this is it. And the last few words about hope interventions. We'll just briefly comment on the fact that there are many studies, many programs, many intervention programs which are built on the cognitive theory of hope developed by Snyder. So these are the programs that are rooted in cognitive behavioral approach, and participants of such a hope programs are taught how to increase their ability of setting right attainable goals, and how to boost their motivation, agency, and how to be more flexible in finding pathways to achieve their goals. But our research on the transcendental aspects of hope in terms of perceived hope shows that there are many other valuable ways how we can increase our hope. Keeping positive relationships, not to be lonely, being able and willing to help others, because as a side effect, we get higher levels of hope, meaningfulness, and life satisfaction. And also being involved in spiritual practices and meditation, because there are so many positive effects of these activities, and one of them is also higher hope. So let me conclude with a quote by our former president Václav Havel, who was a great person, a great humanist and philosopher, and he also commented on hope, and he said that hope is not a belief that things will turn out fine. It's more a certainty that something is meaningful regardless how it turns out at the end. So I also believe that anything difficult and challenging we are going through right now can brought something that is valuable, and actually we can learn from these times how strong we are, how important are relationship with other people, what we can do for others, how we can support and help others. And this is something that can increase hope and our successful coping with difficult times. So if you are interested in learning more about the HOPE Barometer project, so it's There is a book which I mentioned, Hope for a Good Life. There is also the Workbook of Hope, which was edited by Leo Bormans, a Netherlands author. And in this Workbook of Hope, you will find 100 chapters from 100 researchers across the globe about, about hope. And also there is a book that was published 3 years ago that the title is Hope and Well-Being, Psychosocial Correlates and and Benefits. And I'll be happy to share it with you because it's for free, and you can. I'm going to share the link with you if it's possible, and you can download it for free as a gift for your attention. And last but not least, I would also like to invite you to join the HOPE Barometer survey, because this year data collection is going on right now. And again, if it's possible, so I'll be happy to share the link to this study, because your experience is very much valuable. And if you would like to join and fill in this online anonymous questionnaire, which is created for India and Indian respondents, so you will definitely contribute to research in this area, and we find it very, very important, and thank you very much. So this is it. If you have any comments, any questions, we can discuss it briefly now, or you are also most welcome to contact me by email if you are interested in any materials or books or chapters or publications, result of studies or whatever. I'll be happy to provide it for you. So you can just note my email, and it will be very nice if we can keep in touch and develop our collaboration. So for now, I'm going to quit sharing my screen, and if you have any questions or remarks or comments, I'll be happy to address them. And also, I'm going to put the links to the chat.
Thank
so
you.
Now you can see in the chat. I believe it's yeah.
Yes, we received your message.
Okay,
yes.
So you can join the study, or you can also download the book for free if you wish. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alena, for the talk, and also for the generous gift of the free download of the book. I'm sure that'll really be very valuable for all of us here. And since you mentioned questions, yes, in fact, we have quite a few of them here. So I'll try and present them to you in bunches, particularly the ones that are related, so that it's easier for you to address them. So we have a question from Kirti Tyagi asking if hope is an innate trait versus something that can be learned with practice. And as an extension, the question is that can we increase hope from wherever we are at the current level? Is it possible to increase hope?
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for these questions. I find them really important, and I think we briefly touched already these issues. So yeah, there are various approaches to hope, and as I mentioned, one of them by Snyder is the dispositional hope, and Snyder believed that there is an innate element of ability to think more hopefully about ourselves and our lives. So that's why he called it a dispositional hope. But of course, as most of the characteristics, there is an element which is innate, let's say inborn. However, there is always a possibility to increase this quality or the level of this characteristic. So when we look at the hope in terms of character strength or ability to think more hopefully, yeah, as I mentioned, there are programs showing or teaching people how they can think about their life more optimistically, more hopefully. And as I mentioned at the closing of my presentation, yes, the feeling of hope, the perceived hope is something that can be boosted by these activities that I mentioned: mindfulness, meditation, keeping good relationship, doing something good for others. So there are quite many resources that we can use for boosting our hope. Sorry, I can't hear you now.
Pulkit ma'am, you are muted.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I was on mute. So I said thank you for your response, Dr. Alena. And the next question we have for you is an interesting one where one of our participants, Mr. Tapan Roy Chaudhary, would like to understand, does the perception of hope differ from one generation to another?
Sorry, from what? From, I didn't hear.
Across generations, does it differ?
Yes, I think I always mention it in my presentation. So yeah, as I presented the results of demographic variables and hope. So the results showed that yes, hope tends to increase with age, and the lowest levels of both perceived and dispositional hope were found in the younger age, and the older people get, so they tend to increase their hope. So it seems that we can learn how to think more hopefully about life, and also as perceived hope is tightly related to meaningfulness in life. So this is in alignment with other studies showing that the same trajectory we can find for meaningfulness growing with age. So I think this is quite hopeful outcome.
Right. So some of our participants here are saying that they would, perhaps write to you later and they'd like to keep in touch and post their questions. But another one we have here is about how can we relate hope to our self-efficacy?
Yes, that's a very good question. And actually, as mentioned, there is some critiques of Snyder's concept of dispositional hope, that one which is more about hopeful thinking, the three components, agency, goal, pathways. And the research shows that, yes, there are many overlaps and similarities with the concept of self-efficacy. But when we were exploring the various, the differences between perceived hope, the feeling of hope, which is measured by the other scale, so then we found that it's very different. So again, there are as similar to other psychological concepts, you find different theories and different approach to studying the phenomena. So in a hope, one approach is dispositional hope, and this is closely related to self-efficacy. The other is perceived hope, which is more related to spirituality and meaningfulness.
In fact, the same participant, if I understand correctly, they've tuned in all the way from Nepal to, hear you today. And they'd like to understand if hope always works for the career perspective of a human being. So does hope really always work for career life of a human being?
Yeah, there is a research showing that hope is kind of inevitable component, of a good career. Whatever you do, whether it's studying or being engaged in any work. So unless you have hope that you can achieve some valuable goals, unless you have hope that what you do has some positive and significant effect, so it's kind of a basic attunement, being hopeful about the outcomes or our efforts. So yes, it's definitely very important. And what's also important, and we also briefly mentioned this relationship, is that when we try to achieve our hope, so no one says we must do it, by ourselves only. So ability to perceive and accept social support, this is something that can also increase our hope, which is reflected in better achievement and accomplishment.
Right. Thank you. So Lakshmi Iyer would like to understand from you, Alena, that the loss of a loved one always leads to reduction of a sense of hope. So how can we assist those who are grieving to be more hopeful? That's, I think, a very pertinent question we have.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Yeah, again, it's about how we understand hope, because hope, as when I refer back to the last quote by Václav Havel, hope doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that we believe that everything will always go well, but it's an ability to find a meaning in whatever, happened. So we always, when we experience any kind of loss, and of course loss of the beloved one is the most painful. So actually we naturally are grieving, and there is a natural reaction on that. However, then by coping with this loss, we can also try to remember the good, being grateful for the ability to have an opportunity and privilege to experience the person when he or she was with us. And this kind of mindset, when we refocus our attention from the feeling of loss and grief and helplessness, and we refocus it on what was the meaning, or what was the legacy of what is the legacy of the person, and what we can be grateful for, so this is something. And also, of course, how we can, in a spiritual word, how we can still keep in touch with the legacy of the person. This is something that can be quite helpful. And in one of our projects, we were also researching hopes and attitudes and abilities to increase hope in terminally ill patients. And research shows that terminally ill patients, they are not hopeful only about their cure, but their hopes are related to attaining conciliation and forgiveness, and attaining inner harmony, and finding a kind of meaning in their life. So hope does not always mean that things will go well. It means that we are able to be grateful for what went well, and also that we can find a meaning in it, and this can kind of keep us hopeful. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And I think that's a very valuable life lesson for everybody indeed. Now, something more specific to the current times, I think a couple of participants posted this, and maybe I'll also take the liberty to ask you this on behalf of all of us. Given the current global crisis and the pandemic, and how it's very hard to stay hopeful and upbeat, while you did share some interventions towards the end of your talk, could you share some specific strategies that we could apply to our day-to-day life to keep our levels of hope higher?
Yes. Well, in positive psychology, I think it's very important to maintain the balanced attitude to life, so not to let negativity and problems and conflicts, overwhelm our whole life, but also not to focus only on the bright sides. So I think it's about our ability to, keep a balanced attitude. So yes, being aware and not to ignore, not to underestimate, not to neglect the negativity in our life, which is already there, but being able to find the bright sides and hope. There are some specific suggestions what we can do. First, as also research suggests, those people who are higher in gratitude, they show to be higher in hope. So when we count our blessings, when we are remind ourselves what's going on, despite all the difficulties, what's going on, what are the bright side, what are the achievements, what we are grateful for, this is something that has power to increase also our hope in future. Because if there were so many achievements or good things or gifts in the past, so it kind of can increase the belief that this will continue, and the good things will keep happening also in future. So cultivating gratitude. The other thing was what we already said, based on research, higher hope is related to generativity, to acts of kindness, to doing something good for others. So step one, try to reflect what we are grateful for. Step two, try to reflect what you can do for others, at least a small act of kindness, whether it's small help, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a smile. So you may experience that when you do something, even small, for others, that will have a side effect on your well-being and on your own hope. And overall, on the step three, let's say, is about spirituality that also we mentioned. So whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's perceiving the beauties of nature, looking at the sunrise or sunset, or listening to the birds singing, whatever it is that brings to you the deep feeling that you are interconnected, that you are a particle of something broader, and you experience the sense of oneness and connectedness. This is something that has also a significant boosting effect on hope and subjective well-being. So these are the small things that we can incorporate in everyday life. And also, this not only think about duties and tasks and problems that are awaiting for us in future, but also ability to plan, to plan the good things, to incorporate in our time management schedule something that will bring positive experiences. So have something to look forward. Again, be able to plan something, positive, meaningful. Any contribution that we can do for well-being of our own or others, it again has impact on hope. Among many others, I mentioned that just these, but yeah.
No, I think that's really helpful, and that's a short takeaway for all of us as we move on and try our best to deal with these times. So while all of us have been asking you about questions for our own hope, there's somebody who's asking more from the interpersonal perspective, that how do you start the conversation? So I think this is Smita Mishra. She'd like to know that how do you start the conversation with a person who has given up hope?
Yes, that's a hard question, actually. Yeah. And, I guess that when we are talking about a person who has given up, so we are talking about a person who is deeply depressed or helpless. And you're absolutely right that it doesn't feel, appropriate to address, directly positive topics of conversation, because the person will most probably neglect them or refuse them. So, as I've been also doing researching on post-traumatic growth, what doesn't kill us can make us stronger. So we sometimes also, came close to this topic, how people cope with their trauma or challenging life situations when they think that everything just is a disaster and collapsing. And still, we feel how important it is to install hope in them. So what I do, I did not ask about, the positive experience or hope. My approach was that I tried to ask the questions that were at the first level, at the first step was to estimate and acknowledge that it's sometimes it's natural, or sometimes we can afford ourselves to not be in a pink, to be sad or to be depressed, because people who are in depression or hopeless state, so they sometimes they tend to blame themselves. They are angry to themselves and others. So I would not address the positive phenomena directly. I would say more, is everything what you're experiencing now, or what's happening now, is it only bad, and is it only hopeless, or is there anything that is not so bad, or is there anything that did not get worse? So we acknowledge that it's absolutely natural sometimes to feel, any sort of negative experiences or emotion, but we are trying to open the space. Is it all? Or can we find something that is not as bad as it was yesterday, or whether there is a kind of relief, or whether there is something or someone who can help us to feel a little bit better. So I would address it, indirectly, and I would suggest just very small, tiny steps, because people who are depressed, so they tend to refuse topics like happiness, well-being, and so on. In many situations. So taking this more natural and more empathetical attitude, and going indirectly and asking about what's not as be helpful. And also we can use so-called miracle question. So what could it be that could change the situation for better, if anything? So what could be the healing element, and then build the conversation on that. But it really depends on the individual situation of the person. So it's hard for me to give you a kind of general response. So we must be always very sensitive to whom we talk and what is the specific life experience of the person. Yeah.
No, sure. We totally, of course, appreciate that we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach, but as a generic advice, of course, that really is helpful. And as an extension of sorts, there is a question from Des Basnet, who says that sometimes people have everything as resources, but then why do they sometimes still lose hope?
Yeah, you mean have everything in terms of material goods, like this?
So they say resources. I would like to believe it's material as well as social resources.
Yes. Actually, this is something that is related to a phenomena in positive psychology that we call hedonic treadmill. And it shows that people who have a good position and many material things, so they have a higher tendency to get more and more and better and newer and so on. And it's kind of never-ending hunger, So they try to achieve more and more, but it doesn't bring them satisfaction. And the research shows that those people who are less materialistic are more grateful. So often we found that there is a kind of line between material wealth and well-being and hope, and those people who are, this is quite typical for developed Western countries, when especially young people, they have almost everything, they have all their material needs met. However, there is no hope, no joy in it anymore, because it's easy to get anything, and they are more depressed by decision making, what to do, or what the resources to use, because they have so many opportunities. And this is related to higher depression and emptiness, perceived emptiness of life. So hope kind of incorporates in itself that there is a space to struggle for something or attain something that we do not have. And those people who are higher in material wealth, as I said, they tend to be less happy, and hope is related to well-being. So again, there is a phenomena which is meaningfulness, which can be the decisive moment. So if you are wealthy and you use your wealth in a wise way, helping others, contributing to less lucky people, so then this is something that increases your hope and well-being. But when you are wealthy and just keep it for yourself and for your needs, so this then it's related to higher risk meaninglessness and depression. But this is just, I'm not expert in this field, so this is just a first thought about this question.
Right. Thank you for being, so patient with all of our queries, and we still have a couple more coming in. So I also understand that, many of you have posted your questions on the chat window, but some of our participants would like to ask you their questions in person. So we'll request you to please raise your hands, and my colleagues will just try and systematically unmute you one by one. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of echo. So while we do that, I'll pose one more question to you before we begin to unmute you. So Anjana Bindlish would like to understand, Alena, will a sense of contentment increase the level of hope in people?
Yes, if contentment is meant to be related to life satisfaction, so yes, there is a huge research showing that that higher hope is related to higher life satisfaction, higher contentment. So, and it's a kind of bi-directional relationship. So higher hope contributes to higher life satisfaction, subjective well-being, and those people who are more happy, so then they tend to be also more hopeful about their future. So yeah, there is this relationship as per I know.
Right. So we do have, room for a couple more questions before we come to an end. So I think we have a few minutes. So if you have more questions, we'll request you to raise your hand. That'll just make it easier for the, organizers to be able to quickly spot you and help to unmute you. So Mr. Aditya Pandey, would you like to raise your hand so that the organizers could unmute you quickly?
The organizers have already unmuted you. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Can I ask my question?
Please go ahead.
Alena ma'am, I just have one question for you. When I was studying in my university, when I was doing my undergraduate course, there I read a lot of books and I saw a lot of movies wherein they told you to, they tell you to just do what you love, just find your purpose in life and just do what you love. So I tried to ask these questions to my professors. So one of them said, just do what you love and you will not regret it. Just do what makes you crazy and do that. And then I asked the same question to another professor, and then he said, just go with the flow. This is basically your mind creating a drama and nothing else. Just go with the flow, and that's it. So I'm really confused what I should do. Can you please guide me?
Thank you very much for your question. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a problem on my side, but the quality of the sound was really low, so I did not understand very clearly your question. I don't know, Pulkit, did you understand better? Could you kind of summarize it, or?
I echo your sentiment. I think there was a lot of disturbance at the speaker's end. Even I couldn't comprehend completely. Aditya, would you like to quickly rephrase the main part of your question? Because there's some disturbance in audio. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, sure. Is it clear now? Is it loud?
If you could be slightly louder, there's some background noise at your end. Please go on.
Yes, ma'am. Is it audible now?
Yes.
Is it loud?
Yes.
Okay. So the main part of my question is, some people say follow your passion. So just do what makes you crazy. Follow your love, follow your passion, and just do what you want to do. And then another set of people say just go with the flow. This is all just mind creating drama, and so I'm a bit confused about what I should do with my life. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. If I understand well, so the question is which route to take, follow your passion, do what you love, or what do you mean, go with the flow? So you mean do something that is more expected to do, right? Do
Yes,
something that, yeah, okay. Actually, I appreciate you asked the question, but you are expert for your life, so I can hardly tell what you should do. But my opinion, let's say, would be that, and also is based on research in positive psychology. Passion, it can have both positive and negative sides. When passion is blinded, when passion is self-centered, so it can cause some, let's say, difficulties. However, when your passion is rooted in your character strengths, in you are good at something, or in you are good at studying, or if you are very curious, and if you are a very responsible person, if you love talking to people, you see, so there is a set of character strengths. And if you're passionate, what you love to do, what you are engaged, what you really find enjoyable and meaningful, if it's rooted in your own character strengths, so research shows that those people who are doing in their life what is rooted in their character strengths, and what they really do with passion and with love for doing it, so those people are more happy and attain better achievements in what they do. So it depends, what kind of passion we are talking about. However, when there was a research on job satisfaction by Amy Wierzchniewski, a Polish or American psychologist of Polish origin, so she actually found out that in every organization across fields there are three groups of people, and one group of people is the group which takes their employment or work just as a job, taking salary for it and nothing, no other worries. Another group of people are those who tend to take their work as career, so they are more focused on building their strength, their control and responsibilities, and going up in their career. And the third group of employers were those who take whatever they do in their work as calling. And if you ask these people what work means for them, so they usually tend to say, it's something that I love, it's something that I would do, just because I find it's important and I enjoy it and I'm good at it, and I would do it even if I'm not paid for it. So then this attitude to work, which is calling, is tightly related to passion, which is rooted in your character strengths. So if you reflect on that from that point of view, so maybe it will give you some clear sense of direction. What do you think?
Yes, ma'am. Same. Yes, I was instead of using the word passion, I should have used the word calling. So
Yes.
I was a little confused with that. So yes, some people they do their work as if it's their calling. They can do it 24/7 without even getting paid. But there are some people who are just doing because they have to do it. For the sake of doing it, because it's their responsibility to earn money, to look after their family. So, that is why I got confused, between these kind of opinions.
Yes.
Some say follow your calling, just do what you love. Some say just carry your responsibility, go with the flow, and my whole life is in front of me, and it becomes a little confusing, what to do.
Yeah, so so if your passion is rooted in your character strengths, if you take it as a calling, so research shows that there is a higher probability of life and job satisfaction if you follow this way. So, but the decision is of course up to you. And we are just talking about the research findings and applications.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your answer, and all the best for you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Alena. I think we have time for one, or maybe we could squeeze in a second question. I'm not sure. But Dr. Zulfikar, would you like to go ahead with your question, please? Dr. Zulfikar, are you there?
So you need to unmute. We have allowed you from here.
Maybe we could move on to the next question in that case. Parthia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. Could we please have your question? We are slightly short on time, so the interest, I'm also aware that this is perhaps early in the morning for Dr. Alena, so I would want for all of us to respect the timelines. Maybe we could have Dr. Zulfikar, if you could please pick up, or Parthian, one of you share your question, please. All right, so since we are struggling with that, perhaps Anju Dalal's question on the chat window could come up next, wherein she was wondering if motivation and hope go hand in hand.
Sorry, was that a question?
Yes. She's wondering if motivation and hope go hand in hand.
Yeah, specifically in the Rick Snyder's theory of, the cognitive theory of hope, which is supposed to have also a dispositional background. So as I mentioned, there were three components of, cognitive hope, cognitive approach to hope. One is, ability to set appropriate goals. The other was ability to find the pathways to achieving these goals. And the third was about agency, and this is tightly related to our motivation. So actually, when you give up easily, and when you do not keep your motor running, let's say, if you are easily discouraged, so this is something that is of course reflected in the lower probability of attaining goals, and this is also related to lower hope. So willpower is an important component of being successful in attaining goals and being more hopeful about them. Absolutely.
Right. So Smita Mishra, if you could quickly please unmute and ask your question, and I think that will be our last question for today's lecture. Any more questions, we'd welcome you to please write in to Dr. Alena. She's been kind enough to share her contact details. We'll put them on the chat again. Smita, if you could please share your question.
Good evening, Dr. Alena, or good morning rather, and thank you for taking my question. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. You are welcome.
Okay, so I just wanted to know, what is the downside of the hope? There are some downsides of hope. So
thank you. Yeah, please continue. Sorry.
So I just wanted to know, there are a lot of people who are very hopeful all the time, and they're very positive, and that's a good thing. But then that sometimes may become something which they don't work on the current situation. Or what would be the downside of the hope, and what should be the checks for that?
Thank you very much. This is so important question. So thank you for asking.
Thanks, Alena.
Yeah. So everything has, is bright side and dark side, and there is also, of course, dark side of any positive phenomena. Actually, too much of everything is too much. So those people are too much hopeful in terms of they are neglecting the problems, or suppressing problems, or avoiding challenging situations because they just want to keep their hopeful outlook on life. So this is also not a sign of a balanced attitude to life. And there is a Snyder's work on false hope, false hope. And when we try to install or increase hope in our clients or patients, so we definitely should not focus on false hope. And false hope is the kind of hope that is related to, pointing at resources that are missing. When you try to kind of comfort someone who is, let's say, after a breakup, and you say, don't worry, he will definitely come back to you, and he definitely loves you. There is no, it's not true actually. So it's not fair to fill someone's false hope. The other aspect of false hope, and actually you will find also a small chapter about this in the book that I shared, the book Hope and Well-Being. So the other is when we point at some missing qualities of the person, when we try to increase his or her hope, saying that, don't worry, you definitely have, enough resilience to overcome but the person is very low in resilience, you know? So it makes sense to work first on the real resources, and then we can use them, than just pretending that there are some, you know, resources of hope which actually are missing. So false hope can be really a problem, and we always should you know, take this balanced attitude. And actually, this is also a question which we encounter in care of chronically ill patients or dying patients. So they know better than we that their life is coming to its end, and they would clearly perceive that when we say don't worry, definitely it will be better, so that it's not real anymore. So then there is a research on hope in and I already briefly mentioned it before, hope in, you know, terminally ill patients or palliative or people in palliative care, and their hope is more related to, you know, settle with and attain conciliation with other people, and to find some meaning in their life, and to, you know, follow their inner values, what is their, you know, the priority, let's say, how they want to spend the rest of their life. So hope should be always rooted in reality, not in a you know, just something which is not real at all. Does it make sense, this response?
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was really, I really needed this answer to understand the entire thing. So thanks, Alena. Thank you, and lovely session.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I think this was the perfect note to conclude today's proceedings, because as Alena rightly mentioned, that there is a downside to an excess of everything. So on behalf of NPPA, Alena, I would like to again extend a very warm, you know, thank you to you, our gratitude for sharing your research, theory, and patiently addressing all of our queries. Also, thank you for generously sharing your book with us. And one more request before we, you know, sign out. Many of the participants have been requesting for your email ID, which was there on the last slide, which you've already reposted, right? So for everybody's benefit.
Yes, so everyone is welcome to write me. I really will be happy to keep in touch with you. And thank you all thank you first of all, thank you organizers for inviting me. It was a real pleasure and honor, and thank you all for your kind attention. And please keep hopeful, keep well, keep safe. And I believe that when we all hopefully overcome these days, so one day we will meet in person again. So let's hope for it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are wonderful parting words, and I wouldn't have anything better to top that off. So thank you to everybody who's tuned in today, and we look forward to engaging with you again in future NPPA webinars. Thank you again, Alena, and thank you, everybody. So you could please exit the meeting room now. Thank you.
Thanks.